There were these two guys in a lunatic asylum. It's a rainy night in Gotham and Batman goes to Arkham Asylum. He goes to meet the Joker, who is playing with a deck of cards obscured by the shadows. Batman talks to him, trying to make him understand that if they don't ever stop their constant battles, they will end up killing each other. But the Joker is not listening. Batman grabs the criminal's hands and notices white paint on his glove. This man is not the Joker, and Batman knows something terrible is about to happen. The real Joker is buying an abandoned amusement park for his next plan, and while he checks the place, he recalls a bit of his past as a failed comedian who couldn't sustain his pregnant wife. The memories fade away and Joker gets the place, killing the owner with his Joker venom. In the Batcave, Bruce tries to find any clue that would lead him to the Joker, but his attempts are futile, and all he can think about is how little he knows about his enemy and yet how much they hate each other. In the meantime, James Gordon and his daughter Barbara have a nice evening together at their home. James is cutting newspaper clippings about Batman to put in his collection. The old man goes through his collection until he finds the clipping about Batman's first encounter with the Joker, and right then, someone knocks on their door. Barbara remembers that moment and how the description of the Joker caused her some ugly nightmares, but as she opens the door, she comes face to face with a real nightmare. The Joker is there with a sinister smile and his gun pointing at Barbara. The Joker shoots and the bullet goes through her lower stomach, sending her crashing through a glass table in front of her father. Gordon tries to fight the Joker, but the criminal's henchmen attack him and take the man with them, leaving the Joker alone with Barbara, wounded and in pain. The madman grabs a camera and starts undressing her. As he does this, the Joker recalls how desperate he was in the past and how he turned to crime in order to help his pregnant wife. Hours later, Barbara has been taken to the hospital after she was found naked and unconscious. The doctors explain that her spine suffered permanent damage and that she will not walk again. Bullock tells Batman that this was the Joker's work, and Batman asks to be left alone with Barbara. Batman gently talks to her and she awakes in a total state of distress, asking for her father because the Joker has planned something dark for him. At that moment in the amusement park, Jim Gordon is stripped naked and dragged by a group of freaky dwarves across the park until he is taken to the Joker. Gordon finally remembers what happened, but the Joker then lectures Gordon not to remember and block his memories with one simple solution: madness. Ironically, he starts remembering how he learned that his pregnant wife died in a domestic accident. It happened the previous day before he would help some criminals to get inside the chemical plant he used to work at. Although he now had no reason to continue with the crime, he was forced to proceed with the plan. The evil dwarves take Gordon and put him in a train ride, arranged with several monitors and screens with the image of the Joker and his group of circus freaks, all designed to torture and force Gordon to see pictures of his naked daughter, wounded and suffering in pain. All of these while Joker and his freaky henchmen perform a musical number, suggesting Gordon to go insane. As all this is happening, Batman investigates across Gotham, searching for any clue about the Joker. Finally, and after many failed attempts, Batman is summoned to the GCPD, where Bullock gives Batman some tickets to the amusement park, an open invitation from the Joker. After hours of torture, Gordon cannot take it anymore, and Joker tells his henchmen to take Gordon and lock him in a cage, while he remembers the night that changed his life forever. The night that he arranged for the criminals to get inside the chemical plant he used to work at. That night, he had to wear the red helmet that several criminals have used to become the faceless criminal leader known as Red Hood. He went inside and guided the criminals across the plant, but they were spotted by the security officers. The criminals were killed, but he managed to avoid their attacks and ran to a catwalk. However, Batman showed up and the man fell from the catwalk to a vat of acid and was washed out to the river. Slowly, he recovered from the incident, but his body was burning and stinging. The man removed the hood and after seeing his face, madness took over. The Joker continues his sadistic torture of Jim Gordon, trying to force his twisted version of life on him when Batman arrives at the place. The first confrontation is brief, as Joker manages to escape and goes inside the House of Fun. Batman takes Gordon out of the cage and learns that Joker tried to make him go insane. In order to prove him wrong, Gordon asks Batman to capture the Joker and arrest him by the book. Batman goes inside the House of Fun, which has been prepared with a number of deadly traps intended to kill Batman. However, the Dark Knight overcomes the traps while the Joker keeps talking to him about how he just proved a point by driving Gordon insane. Joker claims that all that is required is one bad day to change someone's life forever, and that the world is nothing but a cruel joke. Batman finally locates the Joker and the fight continues. Batman tells Joker that he has failed, that Gordon is not insane, and that only he was weak enough to give himself to madness. The fight continues outside, where Joker's last trick backfires and he awaits to be beaten by Batman for all the crimes he committed. But instead, Batman tries to talk to him about their constant battles. He tries to help Joker to get better and live a normal life. But Joker refuses. It's too late for that, and the situation reminds him of a joke. A joke of two lunatics trying to escape an insane asylum, but they don't do it because one of them is not crazy enough to believe in the sanity of the other. Joker starts laughing and Batman laughs with him as well, and everything comes to an end on a rainy night in Gotham. The Killing Joke is considered the definitive Joker story, and for this reason it is always mentioned among the best stories about the Clown Prince of Crime. But to me, it has a more special value. You see, The Killing Joke is my first Batman book ever. This is the book that started my passion for everything about Batman in the printed media. However, I read that for the first time 10 years ago, when I was still a teenager, and reading it now again after learning so much about Batman and comics in general, I see this story quite differently. When I originally read this, I was shocked by the things that are the most obvious. The amazing art, the deep and complex dialogue, and the action sequences. But looking back now, I realize that I missed so many little details that makes this already awesome story into a true masterpiece. For instance, I missed all of the symbolism. I didn't realize the meaning behind the opening panel of the story with the raindrops being the same as the last panel. That's just one example of the symbolism across the story, and one that represents what it is all about. The Killing Joke is meant to be the quintessential Batman and Joker story, as it showcases their relation as enemies, a relation that existed at that point for nearly 50 years. And this story explores the depth of that relation, explaining how it is meant to be an endless cycle, a never-ending progression of the dynamics between these two characters. The story represents the fact that Batman and Joker are doomed to repeat their conflict over and over, and the book represents that cycle with just 2 panels, perfectly placed at the beginning and the end of the story. These panels indicate that even though many things happened, everything remains the same and it will always start again. And that is but one of the symbolisms of the story. Another one, and perhaps the most important, is the first line of dialogue. This line, which is also the first line of the Joker's joke, is placed at the beginning of the story without any explanation other than describing the scene when Batman enters Joker's cell in Arkham. The very placement of this line is very strange. The opening sequence doesn't have any dialogue at all, not even descriptive captions that were so common in comics back then. They are 2.5 pages of story without a single word of dialogue. Nobody had made such a powerful introduction in any Batman story until then. So, in a story that doesn't rely on captions to explain scenes or panels, it's strange that there is this one line at the beginning and shows up again in the end. The same thing happens with Batman's dialogue as he talks to the man he thinks is the Joker. This dialogue then comes back again in the final confrontation. All this is the symbolism part of this endless cycle between the two of them. Batman and Joker hate each other because they can't understand the other, and they always end up fighting, so they have to repeat the cycle forever, or until one of them dies, which is what Batman tries to prevent. Another example of how this story is a masterpiece are the panel transitions between pages. Imagine almost 40 to 50 pages in which the last panel of every page is connected to the first panel of the next one. That is what happens on this book. Maybe it's an artistic transition like Barbara grabbing Batman's cape, which then turns into the dwarves grabbing Gordon's shirt. Or maybe it's a symbolic transition with dialogue, like when Barbara explains how, as a kid, she used to have nightmares about the Joker, and then the first panel of the next page becomes her nightmare. The entire book is filled with these transitions. If you haven't noticed them, I suggest you grab your book and look closer. It will blow your mind. And the final symbolism is the joke in the end. That joke works as a perfect allegory that describes Batman and Joker. The joke is about two lunatics trying to escape the asylum, but they can't because one of them is not crazy enough to believe in the sanity of the other. That is exactly what happens at the end of the story. The two lunatics represent Batman and Joker, and the fact that they want to leave the asylum represents the desire to abandon insanity and live a normal life. That is what Batman offers the Joker in the end. But the Joker knows very well that Batman is not precisely a sane person, so how can he trust a lunatic to help him achieve sanity? Batman's intention of helping the Joker is the killing joke. That is the punchline. And because the joke ends with the lunatics still in the asylum, it further confirms this endless cycle in which Batman and Joker are trapped in their madness. And that's why I believe this is the definitive Joker story. Not because of the cool dialogue or for how crazy the Joker is or for his origin story. His eternal conflict with Batman is truly what defines him. This story is fascinating to analyze, as are all the stories by Alan Moore. But what about his characterizations? Since the main focus of the story is the Joker, he was the best developed character in the book. Alan Moore presented as a Joker never seen before. In the past, Joker was a cold murderer, sometimes a harmless prankster and other times a gangster out for money. Now this Joker is extremely morbid. This Joker is willing to maim, humiliate and torture just to prove a point. This Joker has a sense of nihilism and presents a philosophy of chaos, arguing that everything is meaningless and random in life. So even his most terrible actions are of no consequence to him. In the past, we only got small glimpses of this kind of Joker, especially in the Bronze Age stories by Neil Adams and Dennis O'Neil, but we didn't get the full picture of this maniac until now. However, this Joker is not just crazy as he claims he is. He says he is totally deranged, but in the end, when he is defeated, he is very much aware of what he did and how terrible his actions were. He claims that sanity in this unfair world is totally crazy, and yet he knows the difference and seems only to act crazy to achieve his goals. That is a very dark kind of character. In fact, I believe Alan Moore went a little too far with the Joker. So much so that he made Batman look incompetent. Batman just couldn't find a clue of the Joker's location, and maybe wouldn't have stopped him if the Joker hadn't sent him the tickets to him, basically implying that Batman was not able to track down the criminal. Batman was shown as a dark knight and a detective, but very ineffective at both. Alan Moore couldn't keep a healthy balance between elevating the Joker and giving Batman the relevance that he needed as the hero. Alan Moore also gave us glimpses of what could be the origin story of the Joker. He based the Red Hood flashbacks upon the original story by Bill Finger in 1951. He expanded this concept in The Killing Joke, but this Joker proves to be an unreliable narrator, as he claims he remembers his past differently every time. In fact, he believes in blocking past memories using his madness. So how can we be sure this is his real origin? Now, the Red Hood character was not the only reference to the old Batman comics. Artist Brian Bolland has said that he was a big fan of the comics illustrated by Dick Sprang in the Golden and Silver Ages, and that would explain why there are so many references and items from those stories. In the book, you can spot a picture of the Silver Age Bat family, including Batmite, Batwoman, Ace the Bat-Hound and the original Batgirl. There is the gyrocopter in the Batcave, and even the Batmobile is the one designed by Dick Sprang all those years back. The cover of Detective Comics number 27, the first appearance of Batman, is also present, making it obvious that Alan Moore and Brian Bolland loved the original comics. I also noticed that in almost all the panels of the Joker, he is always looking directly at the reader, as if he was constantly breaking the fourth wall. Very few stories did that before this, and this choice by Brian Bolland gives the Joker a deeper meaning as a character. Another great detail is the return of Harvey Bullock. Ever since the crisis happened and the Batman comics switched creative teams, Bullock was forgotten and would have probably remained gone if it wasn't for this appearance. And speaking of members of the GCPD, I find the characterization of Commissioner Gordon to be very frustrating. And I don't mean the frail old man that has to endure senseless torture. No. I'm talking about the events before the nightmare started. So there is a very dangerous, very murderous lunatic on the loose in Gotham. And what is the police commissioner doing? Cutting newspaper clippings for his scrapbook. Like, what? I mean, I get everyone needs some rest from time to time, but the city is literally in danger and the head of the police department is very comfortable at home. Again, this is one of those things that seems totally out of character and nonsensical, but it needed to be there to fit certain elements of the story, and in this case, this moment needed to exist to set the stage for the most senseless moment in the history of the Batman comics. The crippling of Barbara Gordon was a complete waste of a wonderful character, and to make it worse, it's totally unfair. Everyone involved in this story returns to normal in the end, except for Barbara, the character that had absolutely nothing to do in the conflict between Batman and Joker. Literally an innocent bystander who was used as a disposable item in a bigger story. The collateral damage of that one is too big and has no redeeming qualities. DC and Alan Moore had a complete disregard for the only relevant female character of this story, and because of that, we lost one of Gotham's best-known heroes. Some people claim that the story was not intended to be part of the canon continuity, but if it wasn't, then why did DC release the Batgirl special comic to have Barbara retire as Batgirl? As I already mentioned in that video, this was their plan all along. All of that is what I missed the first time I read the story, because I knew nothing about the history of Batman. As a teenager, I was fascinated by the Joker dialogue. You know, the madness is the emergency exit and the iconic one bad day stuff. Which, by the way, is pure bullshit. If we believe the Joker's origin, it was not just one bad day. It was a series of unfortunate events and terrible decisions that ended up creating the Joker. We all have bad days in life, but we don't choose madness to survive. It's too fictitious and only teenagers like I was can take those edgy quotes at face value. Now, there is something important to be said. The story that I have read is the new and improved version, recolored by Brian Bolland, but looking at images of the original edition of The Killing Joke, I can tell that the original colors make the story look a bit scarier and old. Those colors scream of the 80s. They are very bright and shiny, contrasting with the somber and serious tone of the story. Plus, the original art featured the yellow oval on Batman's chest, while the new art doesn't have it. It's really interesting to look and compare the two versions. Also, the new version includes a short story in the end by Brian Bolland. Here, a strange man wants to do something terrible, and in the end he does it when he kills Batman. But everything is a story in his mind, so even though he did something very bad, he is still an innocent guy. Maybe that was Brian Bolland's apology for crippling Barbara, because in the end, it's all fictional. And of course I have to mention the ambiguous ending. People like to theorize what happened in the end panels, saying that Batman kills the Joker off camera. Well, since I know the history behind it all, I only see the ending for what it is. I don't really pay any attention to those theories. The Killing Joke is a great story, and it's gorgeous to look at, all thanks to Moore and Bolland. But there is something that I haven't mentioned yet. Why did this story happen? Well, Brian Bolland has explained that he wanted to do a Joker story, and after telling Alan Moore about it, he was on board. But then, why did DC allow them to go ahead with this story? Why was the Joker suddenly so important to get his own prestige format graphic novel? Last time he appeared, he was the same old criminal clown from the Bronze Age. What changed? Well, the answer is simple. Ever since the early 1980s, Warner Brothers was negotiating and discussing the possibility of a Batman movie with DC Comics. For at least 5 years the movie remained stuck in production, but finally in 1987 Warner Brothers had a final script. A script that featured the Joker as the main enemy. So the time was perfect to get the Joker back on the spotlight. And what better way to do it than getting the best comic book writer and a magnificent illustrator who were interested in doing a Joker story? Everything was perfectly timed, and thus, The Killing Joke was created. In various interviews, Alan Moore has stated that he doesn't really like The Killing Joke, as it has nothing interesting to say that would be of importance in the real world. And I agree. However, there is no denying that it's a great fictional story, masterfully executed, disturbing and entertaining at the same time, and most importantly to me, my first Batman book ever.